Jamaica Ginger and Other Concoctions is a short story collection, my most recent one. It's coming out at the end of October this year. It's a compilation of stories, I think all of which have been previously published, but some of them in venues that it wouldn't have been easy to find or even know about. So this collection brings them all together. It is from Tachyon Press, who published my previous short story collection, and were just wonderful to work with and did an excellent job. So when Jacob came asking if I had enough short stories to now make a second, another uh, compilation, I said yes. The title comes from the story Jamaica Ginger, which is in the collection. Um, and I was just going to say Jamaica Ginger and Other Stories, but I co-wrote that story with Nisi Shaw. And I was talking to them about the title, and they said, no, Another Story is so expected. I mean, how about Jamaica Ginger and Other Concoctions? I thought, yes, yes. So that's the title. The stories are all over the map. They are not themed, uh, except insofar as the theme is my obsessions. And some of them would have been published as parts of visual arts exhibits. I think there's three like that. Some of them would have been published in literary journals that often science fiction community isn't reading the literary journals to the same extent that they're reading the spec fic ones. Um, and short stories for me, they are my first love when it comes to writing, partly because the length of time it takes to write a novel breaks this brain that really wants to be done with anything in 20 minutes. Um, Not to say that short stories always take 20 minutes to write. I've had short stories take 5 or 6 years. But there's something about a short story that you can see. Fiction moves. It's a like film and TV, it's a four-dimensional art. It happens in 3 dimensions plus time, so 3 dimensions plus movement. And so the stories have arcs and the characters have arcs. You can conceive of the arc of a short story in ways that for me, a novel is like trying to hug a mattress. Like it's just so much there, and parts of it are always escaping from you. With a short story, you can see the shape of it, and I love the beauty of that, and the randomness of it, because it's not always straight up plot and scene, and it can be more lyrical, where scenes and sections of a novel are important. In a short story, it's lines and words. It is very poetic in that way, even for the most invisible writer. Um, so it was the first form that I could actually finish things in. Uh, the first form where I could begin to grasp what some of my own craft was, where I could see what I had done. Um, and I love writing it. It's difficult for me right now. My life is full and I'm not writing as much as I want to, but I love the short story. I will often get an idea, or a group of words will come to me and I'll use it as a title, not really knowing what I'm going to write. Blackheart Man is my new novel. It just came out in August of this year. It's a novel that I'm so thrilled to see out in the world because it took me about 15 years of going through some really very hard times when I couldn't much write. But I kept coming back to it because I thought I was doing something good. Um, but Blackheart Man is set in an island, the Caribbean island I invented. And the region is not called the Caribbean, but it clearly um, is based on how people speak and what the flora and fauna look like and that kind of stuff. I call it Chin Chin. I have no idea if I'm pronouncing it correctly either, because that is a Taino word that means small. Um, and it is an island that, like so much of the history of the Caribbean, people who had been enslaved ran away from the plantations to it, formed their own communities, um, and were able to get free for a couple of centuries. So, in order to stay free, they don't use money. They have their own gift economy. Um, but they do have to trade with the outside world to some extent. Um, so one of the things they have is a university where it has a really high reputation. And they send their scholars out into the world to find lost books, because so often books and knowledge are one of the casualties of war. You think about the Library at Alexandria, and that can still sort of bring tears to my eyes as a writer. Like, you burned books, my God. So the scholars go out and find books and bring them back to the library. And in order to preserve them, because books can be burned, they turn to the African griot tradition. A griot is, let's say, a balladeer. It isn't quite right, but they are historians who are musicians. So they will write um, musical histories in music. So this country and this university, once they find a lost book, will put it to music. And they will learn it, because you can burn a book, but a song might hang around for centuries. And my main character is, I think of him as a stoner, even though he's the equivalent of indigenous, equivalent of First Nations, a scholar at this university. He's the kind of guy who doesn't exactly recognize his privilege, who thinks everything is clear cut, what's the right thing to do, what's the wrong thing to do, and is quite happy to hair off and do it against anybody's advice. Um, and he gets himself into trouble by uh, he tries to clear the reservoir that has been blocked for a season. Bad things happen. He, the people who had first enslaved them come back and threaten to do so again, and he decides to try to help and to try to keep him out of their way. The university and the city have made him go around collecting versions of how um, this island first uh, vanquished their vanquishers. So that's what he's doing, because he still wants his degree, and they're like, "Yeah, you're not going to get it unless you do this." Bekosi, I believe, is a Taino name. Some of this research I did 15 years ago, and um, Google has become zombie Google. A lot of the things that I could find there that were sourced are not there anymore. But Nares, I remember, Bekosi is a Taino name, and some of the names I invent, uh, some of the names, I look at my bookshelves and might take a surname and make it into a first name, but you can only have so many characters named Delaney. Um, Sometimes, yeah, I just look at covers of old books. Sometimes I look through baby name websites, and sometimes they have meaning, but that can be a little on the nose. So I pick names that are sonorous to me. If I can find a meaning, I'll look it up. But I don't necessarily think too much of the meanings. And sometimes I do use words that have a meaning. The air that comes from Emerson that comes to visit Chin Chin, I named them Tierce, which sounds like third and kind of means third, but I don't remember what relevance it had. Blackheart Man comes from, again, from folklore. In Jamaica, they call him the Blackheart Man. In Barbados, they call him the Heart Man. And it's a tale that parents used to tell to scare their kids into being obedient. And the idea was, if you aren't obedient, the Blackheart Man is going to come and get you, or the Heart Man is going to come and get you. And he drives through the streets at night in a black vehicle and kidnaps kids and eats their living hearts, cuts them out of their body. I mean, yeah. So I thought I would use that, and then at some point realized you probably would need to have a Blackheart Man in the story. So I have I ring the changes on who might be the Blackheart Man. Um, the thing with Chin Chin is so they have their old enslavers have come back 200 years later, threatening to do it again. The first time they triumphed over these people who had sent a squadron to try and recapture people they'd enslaved. Um, three women from the community 200 years before did some kind of magic that drowned the army in tar. There's a pitch lake, as there is in the Caribbean, as there is in LA. Um, but somehow these women managed to drown them in the off flow from the lake that they've had the villagers using to make a road. So the army steps onto the road, and the pitch, which is, maybe 4 or 5 inches thick, swallows them. And it'll be a spoiler, but he shows up pretty soon in the story. That army didn't exactly die for reasons. I do give a reason, but they've been trying to clamber their way up for 200 years. And the angriest of them finally breaks through. And he's also the one who's got the object that helps them have some kind of pseudo life. So you've got the army coming over the sea, you've got the one coming up from beneath. And he, drowned in pitch, he is mired in tar. I mean, pitch and tar are not the same thing, but you get my meaning. So, and he's out for blood. Uh, he thinks they did this to him deliberately. He's had 200 years to just work up such a grudge. So he's a version of the Blackheart Man.